person beside you.
Good evening. My name is Theodis Pace. I'm the president of the Kankakee County branch of the NAACP, and I will be your moderator for the evening. The timer, which is designated by the Kankakee branch, will be Mr. Jess Gathen, and we have Mr. Steve Bertrand of the Kankakee Public Library, who's a partner along with Vicki. We want to again thank for the vineyard, and we want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. Our panel for the evening will be Mr. Steve Nelson, representing the WVLI Radio, Mr. Lee Provost, the Daily Journal, and Mr. Stephen Hunter, Emeritus Alderman for the City of Kankakee for over 40 years, and first Vice President of the NAACP, and also Chair of our Legal Redress Criminal Justice Committee. And then we have our Chair of our Political Action Committee, Ms. Heather Bryant, who is actually putting on this event along with her committee. The candidates for the evening is Ms. Karen Farmer, candidate running for alderman in the 4th Ward of Kankakee, Mr. Ed Pennewick, who also came out of the primary this past last primary election, representing the 6th Ward for the Republican Party, and Mr. Mike Cobb, representing the Democratic Party in the 6th Ward. And earlier in the evening, between the two opponents in the 6th Ward, had a coin flip, and to stay on task with that, Mr. Pennewick will be doing the opening statement for the 2 minutes, followed by Mr. Cobb doing the closing statement between those two individuals at the end of the forum. However, we're going to start the evening off with Ms. Karen Farmer with a 2-minute opening statement, and we shall begin. Ms. Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Pace. Good evening. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Karen Farmer. Thank you to the NAACP and the Public Library for hosting these important forums and inviting me and the other candidates here tonight. And thank all of you for taking time out of your probably busy schedules to be here and engage in this forum. I have been a homeowner in the 4th Ward for about 2 decades. I have lived in Kankakee all of my life. I have always felt that Kankakee is a great city with great people. This election is about moving Kankakee forward. I am the best candidate to serve the 4th Ward in this capacity. It is important to be accessible and keep residents informed. I am a practicing Christian and a member of the Second Baptist Church, where I'm a choir member, a trustee, and a past youth group sponsor. I'm an attorney and counselor at law, an assistant public defender, and I have extensive municipal law experience being corporate counsel for the village of Sun River Terrace and Kankakee Township. I returned home after earning a joint degree, a Juris Doctorate, and a master's in business, graduating cum laude. I returned home because I choose to give back to my community. My family lives here, and I have been a small business owner in downtown Kankakee for about 20 years. So I have a vested interest in helping to make Kankakee a better place for all of us. For many years, I have been a member of and am an immediate past president of the Kankakee Rotary Club, where we believe in service above self. Over the years, I have been involved in this community in many community-related activities. We have very generous people in our community, which I was able to see firsthand being while serving on the board of the United Way for 6 years. I previously worked as a public aid caseworker for 15 years, where I was the union steward and the ASME Local 2000 Executive Board Secretary. Change comes whether we embrace it or not. I want to represent my neighbors in this community because I love Kankakee and I love my neighbors. I believe in this city. We will not always agree on everything, but we who represent our communities must be willing to work together for the good of all of us. United we all stand, divided we all fall. I am excited to see Kankakee moving forward and want to be fully engaged and a part of the solutions needed to continue moving Kankakee forward. I am asking for your vote on April 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farmer. There's a few things I need to also make everyone aware, the opening statement is 2 minutes. There also will be a question and answer period, questions which will be submitted in writing by the audience. There will be some members of the NAACP going around, and you can submit those questions on your respective index card. And there will be a screening by the panel, consist of our local media and Mr. Hunter. The question must be addressed equally to all candidates and will be selected on the basis of the appropriateness, fairness, and general interest. Mr. Pennewick.
Thank you, Mr. Pace. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Mr. Pace, the NAACP, for this opportunity. I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Farmer, a co-worker of mine, Mr. Cobbs, who I've known for 10 to 12, for 15 years. And I'd like to thank all the members of the audience for showing up today and taking part in our aldermanic election. My name is Ed Pennewick. I'm a attorney here in Kankakee County. I've been here since 1995 with my wife, Kim Donald. She is also an attorney. In 1995, we moved initially to Bourbonnais, where we lived there for a year or two, and then we moved to Bradley for a year or two, bought a house, got married, had a family, 2 children. And as the kids got older, my wife said, she goes, I want to move to Kankakee. And I was kind of like, well, wait a second, why is that? And she goes, well, because of the schools. And I'm like, well, what do you mean about that? And she goes, well, it's a very good school system. And of course, as time has borne out, she was absolutely right. So approximately 15 years ago, we moved to Kankakee in Riverview, a nice little 2-bedroom house on on Evergreen and on Cobb. And we raised our children there. They've done well. They went to public schools. One graduated valedictorian. Don't mean to brag, but it's true. The other one's doing very well as a junior at the Kankakee High School as we speak. And my wife became, we were both prosecutors here in 1995. My wife went into private practice not long thereafter. And she works literally right across the way there, across the bridge, or the tunnel to the PNC building as a private attorney. I came here as a prosecutor. I worked here for 23 years as a prosecutor. I am now an assistant public defender here in Kankakee County, serving the indigent. I love what I do. I love what I've done previously. And I enjoy and love Kankakee. As far as why we're here today, ladies and gentlemen, it's basically, I'm of the opinion that Kankakee has been treading water, basically. It's been holding its own, doing okay, but can obviously do much better. I'm here primarily for the 6th Ward, and we'll talk about those issues soon. But my basic issue is government accountability. We need accountability, accessibility. We need more active, proactive government. Not long-term, not necessarily big picture items, but nuts and bolts items. Code enforcement, law enforcement, infrastructure. We all know our neighborhoods. We all know what's wrong with them. And we can all address the issues that are brought before us. There are bigger issues within the city, of course, pension, budget, economic development, TIFs, so on and so forth, and we may address those issues today also. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to represent the 6th Ward to the best of my ability, and I seek your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cobb.
My name is Mike Cobbs. I've been a resident of the 6th Ward for over 20 years. I've been married for 30 years to my beautiful wife, who continues to encourage me. I'm a former Marine and a graduate from Moments High School. I can remember living in Sun River Terrace. I would come down Court Street to Harrison, to Chicago, to Cobb, and admire the beauty of the 6th Ward. I even fantasized that one day I would be able to live there, and oh me, I accomplished it. I can remember when I was in 6th or 7th grade, I was asked, what did I want to be when I grew up? And I probably was the third one to answer. Some people said a policeman, others said a fireman, and I said, I guess since all the men ran out, I had to say, hey, well, I want to be a mailman. I was fortunate enough for the past 35 years, to work predominantly in the 6th Ward, and there I gained so many relationships that I cherish even to this day. If you ever had an opportunity to talk with me or meet with me during the time that I was a mailman, you know I enjoyed what I do, what I did. I'm retired. I retired August 2016. I ran back in 07, but because of something at that time called the Hatch Act, I had to withdraw. And so after retiring, I said, hey, I'm happy. I'm getting fat, I'm retired, life is wonderful. But then the position as alderman came up, and people asked me, well, Mike, are you going to run? And the answer was no. But when they ask me why aren't I running, because as the president of the neighborhood organization, I've been representing my neighbors for the past 10 years. Because of my ability to establish relationships as a letter carrier, there were things going on in the community that my neighbors were concerned about. Therefore, we created the neighborhood organization. We've brought different people with different ideas and different personalities together for the best of their community. That's what I want to bring to the 6th Ward and to the city of Kankakee.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, you have the first question, and the question is going to Mr. Pennyworth.
Do you agree with the riverfront development plans being pushed by the Wells-Armstrong administration? Or does Kankakee need to focus on other areas essential to its economic development, like the recruitment of more employers that would provide more jobs?
I mean, the easy answer would be both. I believe that the Kankakee River is obviously an opportunity for Kankakee, and I think long-term the area will develop and grow and prosper. Some of the houses may be eventually bought out or transformed into an open space for the people of Kankakee. Obviously, for that to happen, there has to be economic growth independent of that. There has to be job opportunities. There has to be a base income and revenue structure in place before we can just start spending money on things that we don't necessarily need at this point. It's a catch-22 situation as to which comes first, the growth or the things that bring people to the community. And again, the complicated yet simple answer is both. So to answer your question, at this point, I obviously think we should always keep an eye on river development, but at this point, I think we should step back a little bit, reassess our economic situation, and go from there.
Mr. Cobb.
I'm going to have to say both as well. In order to attract people, we must make things attractive for them. Right now, if we look at when we come off, is that exit 312, we have to make it appear more attractive. We have to make it attractive for people in order to attract jobs, in order to attract businesses. So I think the riverfront plan is a good idea.
Ms. Farmer.
Well, I could read it. I do have a big mouth, but I guess I better pull that a little closer. I could reiterate everything that both Mr. Pennywick and Mr. Cobb said, I think, and I agree with what they both said. We do need both. You need to make things more attractive for businesses to want to come and for other people to want to live here. I didn't like it when I heard that we were the worst place in Illinois that people wanted to, where people wanted to live, and we were the worst. So I think taking care of all of the things that we need to take care of together is a better course of action, as opposed to saying, well, we don't want to do this or we don't want to do that. I think the whole is what's necessary.
I would like to I add a question to Mr. Nelson's question to go back to you, Mr. Pennywick. So by supporting both, if elected, how would you support the current administration as alderman of the 6th Ward regarding bringing in private development?
I mean, I think that's almost an independent question of the issue we're talking about, Mr. Pace, but I mean, Kankakee, I think, is ripe for economic growth. We have the infrastructure, we have the interstate, we have the rail structure, the open space. There are opportunities here that I think are unique in an area that is otherwise surrounded by suburbs and areas where there is no room for growth. So in that regards, I think economic development can come to Kankakee. We have TIF opportunities that have been utilized for the Schuyler Street downtown area. We could look into that for expansion to the riverfront area. But basically, I think Kankakee is ripe for opportunity, and hopefully that'll be a good base upon which you can build and hopefully get some additional revenue for the city and then grow from there.
And the reason I asked Mr. Cobb and Ms. Farmer, the Hitchcock Group gave a presentation to the Kankakee County Economic Alliance. So with some private business, there's still a possibility that we would probably need somewhere around, I think Mr. Provost and I was there, I know, about $30 million. So that was one of the reasons the question is, so with the current administration and as a council member, how would you support and be involved with the reason I'm saying with that particular question, so Mr. Cobb.
Yeah, well, first of all, I had to meet with the current economic committee to see exactly what our numbers are then. Put ourselves in situations where we can find it more attractive to attract something like that. But you're asking me numbers that, you throwing out 35 million, and that's a lot of money for me to make a decision at this point in time. I'd have to get in there and roll my sleeves up and give you a more solid answer.
Ms. Farmer?
And I would have to say the same. I think you need to be, not only just an alderperson, but you also need to be engaged, go to the meetings, read the information that's given to you and be prepared to do research or anything extra that you need to do in order to make the right decisions.
Mr. Provost, you have the next question. The question's to Mr. Cobb.
Okay. Mike, home ownership continues to decline in the 6th Ward and the city in general. How can this trend be reversed?
Well, I think we have some things in place. The 6th Ward is very attractive, and we have to talk up the 6th Ward. We can't be Kankakeeans bashing Kankakee, number one. But we have some things in place now that would, with safety, the reputation in our community, I think we could make it a lot more attractive.
So with Ms. Farmer, that would be the 4th Ward. Ms. Farmer?
Same question?
Yes.
Well, I know when I purchased my home, I understand there are incentives that are available in Kankakee for people to purchase homes. But I think the problem is that most people don't know about it. I know when I purchased my home, there was a realtor that I had that didn't know about any of the incentives to purchase a home, but there were other realtors that did know, and I was blessed enough to, get in contact with someone that did know, and I was able to tap into some of those things. But I think you have to keep the residents informed. That's very, very important. If they don't know what's going on, then they can't assess those things that are available to them. So I think that's one thing that needs to be taken care of as far as letting them know what's available.
Mr. Hunter, you have the question. I'm sorry. Mr. Pennewick.
No problem. I reiterate what Ms. Farmer said. I think she's spot on a lot of the issues. As I've walked around the 6th Ward, most of the houses that are vacant are still looking okay. They don't look like nuisance property. They're not boarded up, but they're vacant, and they need to be filled. Incentives can be offered through the city. Obviously, property tax is an issue, which I'm sure will be discussed later on during the seminar, but that's a real issue. Kankakee is unfortunately infamous for its high property taxes. I know steps have been taken through City Council, through the tax increase, that there's an offset in Kankakee taxes currently, 25% off the Kankakee portion of the taxes. But there needs to be more. As far as truly abandoned houses, they need to go. There's houses on South Nelson, the roof's gone, it's going to get ruined if it's already been ruined. Those houses cannot be resold, cannot be refurbished, and I think it's our obligation as City Council and as city government to just remove them. A vacant lot, I believe, is better than a dilapidated house.
Thank you. Mr. Hunter, you have the question. The question's to Ms. Farmer.
Okay, I want you to, who's my question directed to?
Ms. Farmer.
Ms. Farmer, I want you to listen to my question very carefully. It's a compound question. So the rest of you, the balance of you must listen as well too. Are there significantly undeveloped areas or empty spaces in your ward? Do you have suggestions for the uses of such spaces? Are there specific areas that can be developed to encourage retail, provide green spaces, or increase the availability of affordable and single-family housing?
Well, as far as the 4th Ward is concerned, empty spaces, there are some. I understand that the biggest one that I thought was an eyesore that I had to look at every time I came out of my home and drove somewhere has been purchased, and they're going to be, I imagine, doing something with it. I'm not familiar with exactly what they're going to be doing with it. But I'm blessed to not see a lot of it in my ward. There is some, and of course, we want to address those, find out. I know there's problems in finding out who the owners are and those kinds of things, but I think there are other things that we can probably do to try to be better at that so that we can take care of those things. And I believe the second part of your question was home ownership?
Do you have suggestions for the uses of such spaces?
Oh, the suggestions. I don't have any particular suggestions. I think that those things can be looked at and researched and talked about and brainstormed on so that we can, come up with some good solutions for those places.
Mr. Penderwick?
I think the 6th Ward is pretty well built up. There are some open spaces. They're very limited, however. I know that as far as filling those spaces, I know on 5th Avenue they've got that little the flower pot with the decorations. I know that there was some money earmarked at the city council meeting. There was talk about where to build or put the next one. I think it was over on Roosevelt or Main Street, and I forget where the other location was specifically. But it needs to be done if possible. It needs to look better. If you walk by a vacant lot versus a agriculture or a lot that's been manicured, it's a huge difference, and it's a huge perception for people driving by. As far as economic growth, the open spaces aren't large enough for that. We have areas like Pendaflex in the 6th Ward that were very vibrant. They're still somewhat occupied, but that's something that needs to be looked at. Re-energize the small economic areas within the 6th Ward and see what we can do about that. And Maple Street, and hopefully that answers your question.
Mr. Cobb?
Well, one of my pet peeves have always been Duane Boulevard. Over the years, it's been neglected. And of course, through the neighborhood organizations, we've been in touch with the alderman where we're almost at the point of doing some upgrades to it. But during the longest time, it was a dog potty. So that could be a garden of the neighborhood. And hopefully that, now once I'm elected, I plan on doing something about it. Even if not, the neighborhood organization will continue to do what they can about the Duane Boulevard. So that's the thing, pet peeve. Going east on Maple where it turns to Waldron, there's some old railroad tracks. And I was talking to one of my constituents about making it a bike path. It goes all the way down through Sunnyside, I believe, past SOT. And it's something that I would, like I said, I'd had to get in, deal with the planning, roll my sleeves up, and see what we can do to make a bike path in that direction. I think it would be very attractive to the 6th Ward.
Thank you. Mr. Provost, you have the question. The question is to Mr. Penderwick, please.
Ed, do you see opportunities to contract out city services as a way to reduce expenses?
I would prefer not under most circumstances. I don't believe outsourcing is the best way to proceed in 90% of situations. You need local people doing local work, getting paid by the local government, reaping the benefits, and turning it back towards the city. I think outsourcing is not a good idea unless absolutely necessary.
Mr. Cobb?
Oh, I have to agree with Ed. Money made in this city could be spent in this city, which helps this city.
Ms. Farmer?
I prefer also not to contract out. However, if we did have to contract out, or if we thought it would be more economically feasible for us to do that, I think that we should at least try to choose those companies that are in our area so that we can, keep it all in Kankakee as opposed to going out to another part of the state or another state to bring somebody in the contract. I was, when I worked at Department of Public Aid, they started the contracting out, and I found out that a lot of times when you contract out, those people really don't know the intricacies of whatever it is that they're doing to do a good job at it. So I think we should be, very limited in what we contract out.
Mr. Nelson, you have questions to Mr. Cobb.
Mr. Cobb, Mayor Chastity Wells Armstrong has called for more diversity in city government. So why not a female police chief?
I wouldn't have a problem with there being a female police chief. I don't understand why not. That shouldn't be a problem with me.
Ms. Farmer?
Well, I think you know my answer. I absolutely think it probably would be, really good to have a female police chief. I think that person could bring some new and different ideas to how to tackle some of the problems that we have as far as crime is concerned. So I absolutely would be for that.
Mr. Pennewick?
And of course, I agree. I know that the search committee has been completed, that the candidates are unfortunately all male, but of course a woman's more than qualified and able to take the job, and I would be welcome to see it.
Ms. Farmer, the Fourth Ward, can you convey what are the three most critical issues that are facing the Fourth Ward, and how would you proceed in processing those endeavors on your part as if elected?
Well, I think the three are crime. My mother recently was a victim of crime. I've been there, as I said, almost 20 years, and I can see the difference in the community from when I moved there and to the way it is now. And even from when I was a child, I know, how what we call the South Side was. So I have seen the blight. I've seen the gang signs. I actually wrote the mayor a letter several years ago because I got a violation for something, just growing my grass a little longer for the first, grow before you cut it. Some man told me that was a good thing to do. Yet I had a couch that sat in my alley for weeks, and I had gang signs on a building across the alley from me. So I think crime is something that we really need to get a handle on before it gets, too bad, where it just needs to be handled before it gets too bad. The second thing I think I would concentrate on would be infrastructure. As I talk to some of the residents in the ward, they feel like they've been forgotten about as far as infrastructure. I had one gentleman say to me that he's been asking for a curb for 20 years. That's all he wants is a curb. And I understand that there is monies that's available for that, but I believe the Fourth Ward, they say it's equally divided out, but I'm not sure the Fourth Ward got their part, and I don't have time for number 3.
Mr. Pennewick?
I think, I've talked to some people in my ward, and I've walked around from various places. I think code enforcement's a big issue. When we've got a code department, people have voiced concerns about how proactive they are or are not, how responsive they are to their needs. Kind of along with what Ms. Farmer says, they seem to pick and choose what they decide they're going to enforce, and I think that's an issue that should be addressed. The bigger picture with code is basically just do what needs to be done. Backyard that's overgrown, take care of it. Backyard with things in the backyard that aren't allowed by code, take care of it. I've heard some excuses at some meetings I've been to regarding accessibility of code enforcement. They can't go over a 3-foot fence to access the property. Of course they can. We just need to be a little bit more proactive on that. One of my big concerns with the 6th Ward are the streets. Nelson and Maple is my number one priority as far as that goes. It's almost undrivable. You got the school there, you've got the gas station, school buses, parents taking their kids to and from school. It's like riding a roller coaster, and it needs to be looked at. I know there's some issues as to the fact it's the 2nd, 7th, and 6th Ward, and that all people have to come together to make that work, but that's exactly what we're hired to do. Lastly, law enforcement is always an issue. The 6th Ward's relatively good in that regards. I think we all walk the streets tonight relatively without fear, but of course there are some horrendous exceptions to that have to be addressed. I'm recommending a full-time beat officer to the ward. It's just big enough that I think it works, and I think that'd be a good idea for the ward.
Mr. Cobb?
Well, safety for one thing. Yes, we do live in a good neighborhood. 6th Ward is relatively pretty decent to walk around at night, but there are places in the 6th Ward that aren't like the ones that maybe Ed and I live in. As a matter of fact, there was some shootings north of us around Chicago and Eagle, and I've talked to those constituents, and I think one of the biggest things we can do to help them is to organize more neighborhood organizations. That seems to be something I know well, and is Uniting Neighborhoods. Because what happens is there are situations that the police can't be everywhere, but the neighbors can. And if we continue to look out for each other, we can create a safer community. The 6th Ward is one of the highest taxing neighborhoods in the city of Kankakee, so Yeah, the taxes are something that we also need to take a look at. Did we get a break? Yes. But we do pay some of the highest taxes in the city of Kankakee. Communication, going back to safety as well. If we can continue to be friendly neighbors, it really makes your neighborhood a little better. You know who's coming, who's going, and you know what you have to do to help them.
All right, thank you. Mr. Provost, you have the question, and the question is to Mr. Pennewick.
Ed, what do you consider the city's greatest strength and conversely its greatest weakness?
I think the greatest strength is the diversity of the city. This is probably one of the most diverse cities you're going to find, and at the end of the day, people get along, and I think that's huge. That's something that can be tapped in as far as recruiting people and just basically showing people that, yes, we're all together in this. This isn't a one area, one neighborhood, one ward. It's a city, and everyone knows it to be a city. And even beyond that, Kankakee cooperates with its county, or Bradley, Bourbonnais. So we're all here together to work for the county and work for the betterment of each other. What was the second question, the second part? Of the city?
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, it's lack of economic opportunity and growth. Without opportunity, there's no jobs. Without jobs, it prevents people from taking away or getting away from where they already been. A person with a job isn't going to deal drugs. They're not going to go to Walmart and steal, and they're not going to want to shoot at someone else. Without economic growth, Kankakee needs to step forward and make something happen and take that next step, and I think it will.
Mr. Cobb.
I have to agree with Ed that the greatest strength and attribute that this city has is its people. I know that from walking the neighborhood of the 6th Ward. Not only did I do the 6th Ward, but I'm sure that I've stepped on every step in this city at one time or another in the past 35 years. And I've had candid conversations with different people of different backgrounds and different economic beliefs. And I've come to the conclusion that no matter what, the greatest strength of this city is the people that we call neighbors. The weakness is economic development. We have to continue to stress that point. We have to continue to let people know that we have great people in this city that are capable of fulfilling those jobs and those markets that they might find interesting to bring to the city, because we have some great attributes. As has been said before, the infrastructure is solid, needs some work. We got a river, we got the highway, we got everything that could attract the community. We just need the people to continue to understand that and continue to make our community attractive.
Ms. Farmer.
I would have to reiterate, however, I think that one of our weaknesses, well, as far as the strength, I think also it is our people. I shared with you that I sat on the board of United Way for 6 years, and I saw how generous the people of Kankakee really are. A lot of times we hear all the bad stuff and we don't get to hear the good stuff. We concentrate on what's bad about Kankakee, but we do have very good people here. And as far as the weaknesses, again, economic growth, there are jobs here, I'm always told, but it seems like we're not connecting the people with the jobs. I think that's important for us to try to find a way to do that, as well as doing things for the children. The children are our future. We always say that, we tout that, but are we really doing anything to make sure that our children stay here? One of the things that I had to study or chose to study in school was something called the brain drain. It happens in other countries where they come get their education and don't go back home. That's what our youth are doing here. They go get their education and they don't come back home. I'm one that chose to come back home to give back to my community. I think if we could make things better for the children and the young people here, we would have a better city, because they would come back, get their education, and bring it back to better Kankakee. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hunter, you have the question, and it's to Mr. Cobb.
Okay, Mike. What problems do you see, if any, in the present level of public services, for example, garbage and litter pickup, street maintenance, police enforcement in your ward? What can you do as the alderman to address these subjects?
Well, I tell you this. People want to know when they can get their leaves out, because a lot of times the leaves go in the street and clog up the sewers and creates a flood. I know it may seem petty, but people at 6th Ward bring that to my attention all the time. Another thing that, as I was walking through my neighborhood, the tree stumps aren't being taken down. The trees are being cut, but they're not pulling the stumps out. And that's a little bit better communication with DPW, Department of Public Works, and as well as knowing, I wish we can do something more proactive when it comes to snow removal. Maybe it's just my lay observation, is that it appears to me, and tell Bird Deer I'm sorry, but it appears to me is that we're more reactive when it comes to snow removal than proactive. For example, if and he can correct me when he see me, but it seems like if it snows at 3 a.m., it seems like DPW is still doing 9 to 5. Eventually the streets are clean and passable, but if you go to work at 4 a.m., it's going to be rather hazardous. So I think we need to do a little bit more proactive with the snow removal, cutting the tree, grinding the tree stumps that are in the terrace, and communicating better leaf pickup when they'll be there, approximately.
Ms. Farmer.
Ms. Farmer, let me repeat this question again. I know mine is kind of compounded. What problems do you see, if any, in the present level of public services, for example, garbage and litter pickup, street maintenance, police enforcement in your ward? What can you do as the alderman to address these subjects?
Well, as far as the public services and what I see, I actually thought that Kankakee did a better job with the snow this year. Sorry about that, Mr. Cobbs, but it just seemed like they did a better job, and I'm not sure why. I thought about them changing up which areas they do first so that particular areas are not always better than other areas. As far as when you're driving on the side streets and that kind of thing, I think they do a pretty good job on the main streets. As far as police, I think that we can do a better job in the policing. I'm not quite sure exactly what we need to do. I just know that as a child growing up in Kankakee, my uncle was a police officer, and I knew all the police officers. I knew their names. They were our neighbors. And I think that we could do a better job in making sure that our police have a stake in the city. I think it would just work better for the entire community if that were so. As far as what I would do as alder person or alderwoman, I would obviously want to get all of the facts and know what the rules are, because there are rules that we have to follow as far as when we get our garbage picked up and that kind of thing. And just make sure I stay in touch with the residents, see what the needs are, and then address them.
Thank you.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, basically, Mr. Henry, I believe that the alderman, that's their job, is to be the conduit to those agencies. It's our job to reach out to code or to reach out to zoning or whatever agency or whatever issue that comes up that's brought to us by the people in the ward. That's exactly why we're there. As far as police go, I know C. Chief Hunt is here, and I've known him for decades now, and I think the police are doing a good job, and I think as far as ward specific, the 6th ward, like I said, I'm advocating a single beat officer. I'd like to talk to the chief, though, about the viability of that before I even formally tender that. But again, it's the alderman's job to reach out to the community and vice versa, have the community reach out to the alderman. And if there's an issue regarding, again, streets, planning, ordinances that need to be passed, that's our job to look into it.
Mr. Provost, you have the question, and to Ms. Farmer.
Karen, do you believe people who do not live within the city boundaries should be appointed to boards representing the city residents?
Well, I think that would depend. I think that it's always good to get other ideas. So that person may be able to bring some new and fresh ideas to the table. However, I think we should make sure that that person knows our community and does the research necessary to be able to make informed decisions and to give, the ideas that would be particular to the city of Kankakee. But I wouldn't say that you would necessarily need to keep all outsiders out. No, I wouldn't think that.
Mr. Pennery.
I hate to ask, Lee, but give an example of what you're talking about.
We have someone on our the sewer utility board, the Karma board, who is not a city resident.
And that's the local Karma, not the Bourbon Air Bradley?
The joint board, yes. That as one of the city representatives?
I think the easy answer, which I think we all agree with, is that, of course, if we can have a local person do a local board, of course it should be from Kankakee. And that's the simplest, easiest answer. I agree with Ms. Farmer. If there's some expertise that is needed, that we have to go beyond the city, by all means, but initially and primarily we should look within.
Mr. Cobb.
I'm familiar with that situation. I think the Karma Board is made up of different individuals from different cities. Is that correct? I'm sure that's correct.
Each community has their own representatives.
So our community has somebody that isn't residing in Kankakee that's on the board. And my answer would be, it would depend on his level of expertise. I would prefer it be, if there's decisions made by people within the city, that be made by people by the city. But it would depend on their level of expertise.
So since we're at Karma, Mr. Pennewick, the latest current issues in the Daily Journal regarding Mr. Sims and other situations within Karma, tell me, how would you address or assist, if elected in April, with the current administration and with Karma being a major generating source of the city of Kankakee?
I mean, I'm familiar with the issue with Mr. Sims, and it's ironic that you talk to two different people to get two directly opposite answers as to whether or not his services are merited or not. Regardless, with Mr. Sims, there has to be a paper trail when providing city services, and so, you know, it's that simple. You can't just assume people are doing their job, and you certainly can't cut someone a check without knowing exactly what they're doing. The Karma Board, I know they get paid a relatively large amount of monthly stipend. I would have to see what exactly is being done. Other than the Journal and talking briefly to other aldermen or current sitting aldermen, I have not fleshed that out as much to know exactly where that money is going. Obviously, it seems somewhat unusual to receive money from an agency that you are allegedly supervising or at least monitoring. So that's something I would need to look into further before I can make a truly informed decision about that.
So with that, and this will be a question to all three of you all, the accountability, if you elected, how would you go about to ensure there's more accountability as an alderman and representing the respective people of the city?
Was that question to me?
No, I'm just adding on to Mr. Pennewick.
I mean, basically, that's in not necessarily a comptroller per se, but there needs to be a paper trail. There needs to be each agency needs to be directly accountable to itself for the money that's either being requested or dispersed, and then there needs to be, beyond that, another agency, be an alderman or a city auditor that reviews the information to make sure it's valid and viable.
Mr. Cobb.
It's unfortunate that that much money was spent to bring about such a great disagreement without any accountability. So definitely there has to be more accountability if it is through transparency. And that, you know, we would have to look at the way we do business and do business differently. Because as Ed said, you talk to one person, you hear one thing, you talk to somebody else, you hear another. And so that whole situation, if we're referring to Sims and Karma, is definitely going to have to be litigated by someone with a lot of expertise. But if there's something that was promised and not given, then that needs to be rectified as well.
Ms. Farmer.
I would reiterate what Mr. Pennewick said. I think you have to have a paper trail. You have to have checks and balances in almost everything. And good leadership means that you would make sure that those things are in place. But to give a really informed answer to that question, I too would need to do a little bit more research on that.
Mr. Hunter, a question, Mr. Cobb.
Mr. Cobb, I have a question from the audience. I have a question from the audience. You prepared?
Of course.
Okay. Mr. Cobb, what volunteer activities have you performed for the residents in your ward, and how have you been involved?
For me?
Yes.
Oh.
Can you repeat
Well,
again? Repeat
no,
it.
I got it. I got that. Well, I've been a neighborhood organization president for the past 10 years, where we've done things like, you know, be aware of the boulevard. We've done things that we help our neighbors. And on a personal level, and as a realtor, I spoke to 3 schools. I spoke to Steuben, Avis, and the junior high I've spoken at. But we have, as a neighborhood organization, did whatever it took to keep our neighbors safe, to keep our neighbors engaged, informed, and involved.
Ms. Farmer?
The question was, what have I done for the Fourth Ward?
Let me repeat it.
If-
What volunteer activities have you performed for the residents in your ward? How have you been involved?
As far as particularly in my ward, I would say all of the community activities that I have done over the span of my lifetime have, I'm sure, touched someone in the Fourth Ward. As far as my neighbors, we look out for each other. We kind of have like our own little circle of neighborhood watchers. I have some businesses that are across the street from me. At night, I watch out for them. During the day when I'm at work, they watch out for my mother. And we just, keep in contact with each other and see what the needs are. When my mother was ill, they brought over things for her to eat. I took them fruit baskets, and we just, are neighbors. And that's what you kind of have to do in order to know what's needed and to be able to represent the people, is to be their neighbor.
Mr. Pennewick?
I think Mr. Cobb's has got me beat hands down regarding in the 6th Ward, but I will say that I worked for when I was a prosecutor, I'd like to think I've been helping out the ward through my career as a prosecutor and now as a public defender. My son and I, when he was much younger, used to go around with a rake and a shovel and clean out the drains after they got clogged up in the springtime, and that was a fun activity we used to do, and it made the neighborhood a little bit nicer. Obviously, it's about, community involvement. Of course, it's crucial as far as looking around, seeing what needs to be done in the area. I've made some recommendations as to some improvements to Cobb Park back in the day that have not really been implemented, but obviously it's incumbent upon a ward alderman to be involved with the neighborhood, and that, of course, primarily through the constituents and obviously through their own observations.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, you have the question, and the question is to Ms. Farmer.
Did Ed lead the question? Ed answer a question first yet?
I don't. Oh, I have. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's always too like me and Karen.
Fine with me.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's because your question is so short. Mr. Nelson?
According to AreaVibes.com, the overall Kankakee crime rate is 96% higher than the average of crimes committed in Illinois. It is also 75% higher than the national average. When it comes to violent crime, Kankakee shows a crime rate that is 82% higher than the Illinois average. The crime rate is also 109% higher than the national average. When it comes to property crimes, Kankakee is shown to be 99% higher than the Illinois average and 69% higher than the national average. Do you see this crime reputation as impeding economic growth?
Absolutely. Again, I shared with you all that I was very disappointed in knowing that Kankakee was at the bottom of the list. I've lived here all my life, and I love Kankakee, and that saddened me greatly. I saw those statistics, and when I looked at it, we have a chance of 1 in 25 compared to 1 in 228 people in Illinois chance of becoming a victim and of violent crime, and 1 out of 25 versus 1 out of 50 for property. And that's just not acceptable. It just simply is not acceptable. Not in the city that I love, the city I grew up in. So I think that we need to, one of the good things about that, it's supposed to be lower in 2019. So I'm hoping that that is so. I think you know that I'm an attorney, I'm an assistant public defender, so I do try to talk to the people that I come in contact with to encourage them to do better. I try to plant seeds wherever I can. And we have to, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. We just have to do things that are going to make people want to do better. And that is economic growth and making sure we connect the people with the jobs. I can't tell you how many people I've heard being the president of Rotary, and the people that I brought in to speak say that there are jobs available but no one to give the jobs to. We've got to address that.
Mr. Pennewick?
I don't question those statistics, but they do seem slightly extreme, and I'd like to see the.
Ed, you can look them up for yourself.
Absolutely.
At areavibes.com.
I understand. And like I said, I've worked as a prosecutor since 1995 here until last year, so I am very familiar, intimately familiar with the shootings and the sexual assaults and the home invasions. Getting back to your question, however, though, I know it's like if you go to realtor.com or something like that, you punch up Kankakee and you get terrible things, terrible about the school, terrible about the crime. And so the question becomes, how much does perception dictate reality? Of course, it affects economic growth. It affects all aspects of it. That's why, notwithstanding the website, I'd like to question their numbers slightly. How do you fix that? I'm not too sure. There was talk years ago with a small group of Riverview residents about going to realtor.com or those types of agencies and saying, come on, you can't say this about our community. Unfortunately, it never took traction, but it's a problem. And again, just saying it doesn't make it so, and things I think are on the rebound, so hopefully things will get better over time.
Thank you. Mr. Cobb.
Totally disappointed. I must admit, I had a conversation with the police chief, and I know that I kind of agree with Ed that we can't compare ourselves to a website. We just have to do better as a community. Some of those things are sort of sensationalized, if you will. But with my communication with the police chief I had the other day, we're doing better. Do we have some work to do? Absolutely. Any city would have work to do. I think we are on the right path to clearing up those numbers.
Thank you. We're at a segment of for closing statements, which is 2 minutes. We want to thank Mr. Bertrand, you and your staff. We want to thank Mr. Hunter, Mr. Provost, and Mr. Nelson as panelists, and of course our timer and the candidates. Ms. Farmer, we're going to start with you with the 2 minutes closing statement, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Pace. I heard a wise person say once, if you are not willing to put skin in the game, don't complain and criticize. It is easy for us to sit back and watch other people do all the work and then complain. I don't want to be a part of that negativity. I want to remain positive in all aspects of my life. We all have a part in helping make the City of Kankakee work for all of its residents. When you vote for me, you are voting for a person who is experienced, honest, hardworking, ready, willing, and able to think outside of the box, network with others, and work well with others to help keep Kankakee moving forward. I've seen some new and exciting things happening, and I want to bring new, fresh, creative ideas to continue to help bring solutions to the issues that we all face now and in the future. I want to be a part of the momentum of moving Kankakee forward. It is exciting, and anything worth having is worth working hard for, and I'm willing to do that. I will be accessible to my neighbors in the 4th Ward, and will keep our residents informed. I will make Exit 308 a priority. Infrastructure, I think, is a priority. Reducing crime or continuing to reduce crime, because I agree that we're doing better and we're on the right direction, but we just need to put a little bit more effort into it. I would also like to assist, again, in helping residents gain their education or do whatever it is they need to do to connect with the jobs that are already available for them in Kankakee, and of course to bring new jobs to the area. We all want to pay less taxes. I have the tools, the skills, and the absolute desire to be a great alderperson. Thank you again to all involved with this important forum. Vote for Karen Farmer for the 4th Ward on April 2nd. Thank you.
Mr. Penaway, please.
Mr. Pace, I would like to thank the NAACP for having this forum. It's a great opportunity to come forward for the voters of this area. I thank Mr. Cobbs for appearing, Ms. Farmer, my co-worker and friend. To quote Gordon Gekko, Kankakee, for lack of a better word, is good. It's a good area. It's got good people. At the end of the day, no matter all the warts, all the crime, you can walk around, you can talk to your neighbors, you can do whatever you want, wherever you want. As an alderman, if I'm elected, I again reference accountability and accessibility. We have a government budget of approximately $25 billion. Where is that money going? How is it bettering in Kankakee? You look at the various agencies we have, how are they making Kankakee better? Can they do better? Are there complaints with them? These are things that have to be addressed by the aldermen, by the elected officials of Kankakee. We have to do what we can to foster economic growth, and we need to do what we can to make sure that the people know that we are working in their best interests. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with all of you today, and I like Ms. Farmer, ask for and welcome your vote. April 2nd, early voting has started over at the county building. It's quick and painless, and I thank you for your time.
Mr. Cobb.
I'd just like to thank, first of all, the NAACP for caring enough about their community to even consider this forum. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for caring enough about your city to attend this forum. I reflect your concern. My service to our community did not start with this campaign. As many as you know, I was a mailman for 35 years where a neighborhood, a community embraced me, and I embraced them. As a letter carrier, my service started with bringing the first food drive to the city of Kankakee, where we was collecting canned goods from door to door and sharing those with homeless shelters. It continued. I've rescued dogs. I checked on the elderly. I spoke at different schools at their career days. With those relationships that I established as a letter carrier, we started the Riverside Neighborhood Organization. For the past 10 years, it's been there, where we have assisted in the Kilbride Classic year after year after year. We were volunteers. Additionally, we would walk through the neighborhoods and clean up before the yearly bike ride. We created ways to get to know your neighbors. We created ways to get to know your neighbors, and if you see something, say something. I want to let everybody know that because we have a good police force in our community. When I spoke with the commissioner, the crimes against for police to the people the communication has been better. So if you see something, say something. Don't fear it. That's the way we make our neighborhoods safer, and that's my goal as the alderman, to continue to make a safer neighborhood, continue economic development. I too want to thank Ed for his interest in public service. Ed Pennewick, I'm sorry. He's my neighbor, I call him Ed.
Absolutely.
Karen Farmer. Additionally, Steve Kelly, Tom Ivy for their interest in public service. I understand their interest. I embrace that, and I ask them that you embrace me. April 2nd would be the next election. As Ed said, early voting has already started, and it is painless. Thank you.
We want to thank our opponents and our candidates for the 4th Ward and the 6th Ward. The summary of tonight talked about public safety, law enforcement, infrastructure, the riverfront project, blight, and crime. And so we will have our opportunity to go out and vote for our respective individuals that we're supporting on Tuesday, April 2nd. Again, we want to thank you for attending. Thank you.